Yeah. Listen, I do think that it's obviously tough. I often also say to students, like in this period, and the whole world is dealing with this, in this period, that it takes a little bit more time to maybe get to the end of your degree. You know, this is maybe an extra 6 months, or even if it's a year, an extra year in your 80-year lifetime. You know, in the bigger picture, it's actually not that much. Yes, it comes at a cost, and I'm very glad that my institution has has allowed students to get a full fee rebate for courses that they drop. So rather do things, you know, slightly less dense and take a little bit more time and finish your degree. Is it still useful when you've done all of that? I think there is a bigger need than ever for engineers to make sure that we realize what something like COVID does to a society, how to serve our people. I'm very excited in my own field of work and research as a transport engineer all around the world. Cycling all of a sudden is becoming a much more viable option. And, you know, I'm from the Netherlands, I know cycling, but, you know, France, Italy, Africa, America, cycling wasn't that big of a mode. And now all of a sudden, you know, and people are claiming back the streets. People are indicating that they don't want to live the way they were living before. They don't want the pollution. They don't want the congestion. We need to rethink how we're functioning. And I think that comes back to the education. We need to rethink how we do things as well. After COVID, I don't think everything will be face to face, you know, and I think this course that I've just run, some of the narrated lectures are perfectly fine. You know, I don't need to see the students' faces, because if they don't get it, they watch that video again, or they watch that lecture again, and they will get it. Others, I would like to help them, and Tartar in the lab, obviously you need to be face to face to show things and experience things. But maybe we can do that in half the time. You know, maybe they can prep themselves first, and then instead coming a week to the Cape, they come for 2 days and do a test after the weekend, and we have that intense practicing with them and changing things around. So I think the world will never go back the way it was. And I think as engineers, it's really, really exciting to be part of that and part of that rethinking. And I've even been asked by the province to be part of a research and rethink group where we try to rethink how we can make quick wins in the transport systems to make sure that we don't go back to normal, because normal wasn't that good.
So as a start, I would reference them to somewhat of a similarity during Fees Must Fall. I mean, that was a period where some people felt, you know, are we going to finish this thing? What's happening? Because during the day, they're out in the streets, and you know, learning is taught. And even then, it was maybe possibly even slightly tougher, because there wasn't any material to remote learn. Learning stopped.
Yes.
And they were out in the streets, and the little that they could do, then they did for those that studied after they were at the streets. So I would say, look, listen, if you have to sort of draw some similarities, there are people that went through such a period where learning seemed to have stopped, but they made it through. So you do persevere. What I would advise them to do, though, is look on the bright side. I feel there is opportunity through this hardship. We speak, for example, the buzzwords for fourth industrial revolution all over the country. But a period like this has shown us that we aren't ready as a country in terms of infrastructure to even try and implement such things. But what it's also doing is it's taking students and making them comfortable in a digital space, because now they have to, just the learning process is a very digitalized process. Hopefully that spills over into them being professionals, because it's something that inherently was formed in them as they were training. So you try and elaborate to them, look, listen, you can be the crop that takes us into the next stratosphere of the world. It's not easy. Again, as Prof said, institutions are trying to then mitigate the cost of maybe such a delay. Our institution, I know, is sort of delaying when the year actually ends. So where typically the year is what the calendar year is, the academic year is sort of spilling over into next year to make sure that you don't necessarily add an extra physical year in terms of time. You can just, your workload might increase a bit because you're sort of merging 2 years into one a bit, but it's to try and facilitate that if you wanted to be at an institution for 3 years, you are out in the 3 years. So you encourage them in that the institution is there with you, will support you through that, but then imprint in the current crop of students that, looking at the needs of the world, you guys are well geared to take us from archaic world into a new stratosphere with how we're dealing with how you're educated. So one hopes that it spills over into practice, but obviously the rest of society needs to pull in and have the infrastructure for professionals in the future to work in a digital space. If we're going to talk about 4IR, do we necessarily have to have people counting vehicles, or can we have something that sits and just gives us that data as professionals? You know, that type of thinking, that could possibly be the solutions that come out of a space like COVID. I also found that it gives the opportunity to increase access to education, like Prof said. We've got limited space and seats available for students to sit down. But in refining, even though it wasn't by choice, but in refining how we give education remotely, we could have the spillover that we have an increased access to education. Imagine a degree that's offered face-to-face contact and the same degree still offered online. Possibly, maybe it might take longer for the online people, but it becomes slightly cheaper because you don't have to have the infrastructure to accommodate that student. So it might increase the access to education for students going forward. So a current student right now must be motivated by the fact that they are well geared to change the future. And anyone else maybe that might be thinking of coming into civil engineering, they might need to at least embrace the idea that things will be different. They might not, if they thought, yo, I can't afford civil engineering because it's only offered in certain institutions and maybe logistically how I live, I can't afford to be in that city. That might not work. At least now there might be an opportunity for them to still learn civil engineering remotely. So I can take it forward. It might not be answering exactly the question that you asked initially, but thinking about this makes me realize that we could also facilitate practicals remotely, possibly through augmented reality, where you physically actually conduct an experiment and touch all the apparatus through a device. And you know, okay, I need to measure this. And this might take us to the point where we need, because it also helps with the training that before you waste the resources that tends to be a part of a practical, you pour out a bit of this chemical, you pour out that water. Maybe you have a few trial runs digitally, and if you pass a certain grade there, then you can move on to quickly doing it in real life, where we know, look, you're not going to waste resources. And that might be where the opportunity that we get from COVID for people that are learning in the space.